Today's lesson is, are 18-year-olds ready to vote? Hello, everyone. I'm Mike.
I'm Roger.
I guess the simple answer to that is maybe 18-year-olds are ready to vote, but the more important issue is they're not allowed to vote here in Taiwan. We had a referendum on this back in 2022 during the election that year, but generally people in Taiwan said no, let's keep the voting age at 20. A lot of people probably thought, like a person whose opinion we heard yesterday, Jackson, who is a business owner, they kind of thought that young people maybe are a little too immature, a little too young, don't have the wisdom and life experience to make proper decisions on these issues. And so, no, let's keep it at 20. People are a little older, a little more mature, and that is certainly the way it is now. But one of these questions that doesn't seem to go away. So we may be facing another referendum or another sort of national vote to choose what the policy should be in the near future. And both today and yesterday we heard, and we will continue to hear, different opinions from different people in society about what they think on this question of lowering the voting age by 2 years.
And we will begin with Brian, who's 29 years old, and he's a journalist. Let's find out what he has to say about this issue.
Brian, 29, journalist. It's not a black and white issue. As a compromise, 18-year-olds could be granted voting rights only in local rather than national elections. And if young people show that they can handle that responsibility, it could serve as a trial phase before granting them full national voting rights.
大家好，第一部分介绍名词 journalist， 它的意思是新闻记者或是新闻工作者。例如 The journalist called the police department for an official statement on the murder investigation. 记者致电警察局，要求提供这宗谋杀案调查的官方声明。或者 Stacy is a good writer, so she should be a journalist. Stacy 很擅长写作，所以她应该去当记者。接下来看到名词 compromise， 表示折中方案、妥协或是让步。例如 After receiving multiple complaints about the new attendance policy, the manager decided to make a few compromises. 在新的出勤规定引来多方抱怨后，经理决定做些妥协。或是Jack refused to accept any compromises on his principles. Jack 拒绝在原则上做出任何让步。另外 compromise 也可以当作动词使用。例如 Terry decided to compromise with Ruth rather than keep disagreeing with her. Terry 决定跟 Ruth 妥协，不继续与她争执。又或者说 The two nations compromised about the contested territory. 那两个国家就争议领土达成妥协。继续看到名词 phase， 它的意思是发展或变化的阶段或是时期。例如 The project is in its final phase and will be completed soon. 这个专案已进入最后阶段，很快就会完成。也可以说 Phase 1 of our marketing strategy is getting the product's name recognized. 我们行销策略的第一阶段是让产品有辨识度。
Okay, so again, we're talking about Brian. Again, he's 29 years old, and he is a journalist. A journalist is a reporter. They write news stories for newspapers or news organizations. They could also be photographers as well, or they could actually work in TV as well, writing reports to have on TV or on the internet or wherever. And here's what he has to say. It's not a black and white issue, okay? We're not talking about race here, black people or white people. We're just talking about yes or no issue, okay? It's not that simple. A lot of times the question is yes or no. It's either this way or it's that way. There's nothing in between. But I guess he's saying that there is something in between. It's not black and white. It's not cut and dry. There are other kinds of perspectives. Maybe there's a gray area as well.
That's right. We don't usually say it's a gray issue, but you would say, as Roger did, there's a lot of gray area here. There's a lot of, well, yes sometimes and no sometimes. I mean, a black and white issue should be, should we let 12-year-olds drive or let 12-year-olds buy beer or something? Well, no, clearly we shouldn't. No one would vote for that. That's a black and white issue. But as questions on personal freedom and things like that, well, it depends. We always also might say there's a lot of nuance in this question, right? It's not really clear. There's no easy answers here, and really depends on who you talk to, when you talk to them, their politics, their point of view. So it's a tough, tricky, complicated question. It's a complicated thing to come up with an answer that will satisfy anyone. It's not a black and white issue. He says, as a compromise, as a kind of way to go down the middle, this is his proposal. So a compromise is sort of trying to make both sides a little bit happy, but also a little bit disappointed in your decision. So we're trying to find the happy middle ground between two different points of view. So as a compromise, 18-year-olds could be granted voting rights only in local rather than national elections. Okay, so it's sort of like baby steps to being able to choose the president of the country. That won't be what you're allowed to do from when you're 18 or 19 until you're 20, but you will be allowed to vote for your city politicians, the local elections. So voting for mayor, voting for city councilors, voting for those local politicians, the borough wardens, I think, those people who are really local in your neighborhood. Yeah, vote for those guys because they can't send you to war, they can't raise taxes, they can't do really important things in society, but it will allow young people to be engaged in the political process. So grant them or give them voting rights. When you grant something, you give someone often a right or a responsibility in a fairly formal way. Okay, so I'm granting you permission to use my car. I am allowing you to do something like that. So basically give them voting rights legally, right? Pass a law that says 18-year-olds can vote, but only in local rather than as opposed to instead of national elections. So yeah, that is a compromise. It's kind of the middle way. They can vote, but they can't vote on the really important things.
Right, they cannot vote for people in the National Council or the National Legislature, for example, but they can vote for local representatives, the mayor, as you said, and people like that. And Brian goes on to say, and if young people show that they can handle that responsibility, it could serve as a trial phase before granting them full national voting rights. So basically he's saying that, well, we could try it in a local election first and see how it goes, okay? So if young people start voting at the age of 18 and they demonstrate that they can handle the responsibility of voting for their leaders, then we could say, okay, they're actually mature enough to actually vote in a national election. So yes, indeed, the first phase would be voting in the local elections, okay? So a phase here is just a section or a part of a longer process. So this is the trial phase, the beginning part of this experiment. If they pass that test, then they can go on and take the next one, which would be to be able to vote in national elections.
That sounds kind of temporary, like they would do it for 5 or 10 years, see how it goes, and then maybe officially lower the voting age down to 18. I guess the other problem with that is that the votes that the young people cast, who they choose, will satisfy one party but not the other party. So how are they going to judge whether young people vote well? Because one party who don't get elected will say young people should never be allowed to vote. But the party that does get their city councilors or mayors elected will say, oh, this is a great system. We love it because it gives us more power. But it is an interesting compromise. All right, let's move on. We're going to have Cindy and Derek. And one is a 38-year-old woman. That's Cindy. And Derek is a 24-year-old student. So let's check out their points of view.
Cindy, 38, stay-at-home mom. I worry that younger voters could be more susceptible to peer pressure, social media, or family influence. Their votes might not truly be their own, you know?
Derek, 24, graduate student. Letting people take part in the voting process earlier can lead to lifelong political engagement. I think we should encourage young people to care about voting and foster a greater interest in public affairs.
第二部分介绍形容词 susceptible， 表示易受影响的或是易受伤害的。我们可以说 People who lack sleep are more susceptible to stress and anxiety. 缺乏睡眠的人较易受到压力与焦虑的影响。又或者说 I'm very susceptible to sunburns, but I never tan. 我很容易晒伤，但我从不会晒黑。接着介绍名词 peer， 表示同侪或是同辈。可以说 Lily is respected by her peers because she is very clever. Lily 因为非常聪明而受到同侪尊敬。又或者说 Jessica often feels pressured by her peers to attend social events she's not interested in. Jessica 经常感到来自同侪的压力，迫使她参加不感兴趣的社交活动。继续看到形容词 lifelong， 它的意思是终身的或是一辈子的。例如 Carl deeply appreciates the lifelong friendships he formed during his time in college. Carl 对大学时期建立的终身友谊深怀感激。
Okay, so we've got two more opinions here. We've got Cindy. She's a 38-year-old stay-at-home mom, or we could say she's a housewife. She's a homemaker. We could say that as well.
Yep.
And so, again, she's not working. She's just at home taking care of the kids and preparing food for the family and things like that. I worry that younger voters could be more susceptible to peer pressure, social media, or family influence. Okay, so here we're talking about being susceptible to something. That means you're vulnerable to something. It could easily happen to you. You're likely to be influenced by someone. You're likely to get sick or something. You could be susceptible to getting a cold, for example, if you don't wash your hands or if you don't wear a mask or whatever, or don't eat properly. You could get a cold. You're susceptible to getting a cold. And here, young people would be susceptible to peer pressure. They'd have too much peer pressure. Your peers, of course, are people who are in the same general situation in your life. They're your classmates or your co-workers or your playmates or whatever. Those are your peers. And they could also be susceptible to social media, the internet, their phones and stuff like that. Or they could be influenced by their family members.
All right. So, yeah, young people are often following trends and their friends are saying, you're not cool if you don't do this. So her idea is that they'll get influenced by people on the internet, TikTok influencers. They'll get influenced by social media. Their friends will tell them who to vote for, and they'll just sort of go along with the gang, go along with everyone else because they don't want to be weird or be cast out of their social group. So they won't really be thinking independently. They'll be too easily influenced by others. So their votes, she says, might not truly be their own, you know? So she's kind of putting out this point of view, and the you know is sort of trying to get us to agree with her and see her point of view. I would say that could be true, but older people can also be susceptible to social media. Where do you get your news? That could influence how you vote. So it's not just young people, but I see her point. Young people often don't have the independent thinking maybe that slightly older people would. Interesting point of view. Now we're going to go over to a young person. He's not that young, Derek. He's 24, so he can still vote, but he's only just recently gotten this right. He's a graduate student, so he's studying for a master's degree or a PhD, a higher level degree at university. He says letting people take part in the voting process earlier can lead to lifelong political engagement. So he thinks it's good for kids, younger people, to be involved with politics because then they'll appreciate politics more. They'll be involved in it at a young age when they're still young and passionate about some of this stuff, and that will be good. They'll carry that interest, that passion, that taking politics and voting seriously. They'll carry that into their older age, so they will always be politically engaged. They'll be listening to the politicians, evaluating them, comparing different policies from different parties, and this will be a lifelong situation, a lifelong relationship or interest in politics, meaning for the rest of their life. As long as they are alive, they will do this. We often use this for things that started maybe young and then carried on through our life. I've had a lifelong interest in hot air balloons or something like that. I always wanted to fly one. I love pictures of them. I take photographs. I go down to Taidung. I go on rides. It's something I'm really interested in, and it started when I was 15 or 5, and now I'm 75, and I'm still passionate about it. It's a lifelong thing. If they take part, if they are involved or participate in the voting process, he thinks that's a good thing.
Yep, if they're a part of the voting process or if they participate, then they will be engaged all their lives. And I think we should encourage young people to care about voting and foster a greater interest in public affairs. So here, if you foster something, you encourage something to happen, you encourage the development of something. So yes, indeed, it would foster this interest in public affairs. People would get more and more interested in the government, and they wouldn't be so pessimistic about it, and they probably wouldn't say, oh, I'm not going to vote because they're just going to vote for a bunch of criminals anyway. What can we do? So this way, yeah, it's probably going to get people more interested in the democratic process, and that would be good for the country overall. Okay, we're at the end of the second part of our lesson for today. Here comes the third part. We're going to hear from Leo and Annie now.
Leo, 28, event planner. Lowering the voting age could be effective as long as there's more focus on civic education in high school. For example, teenagers should learn more about the election process, major political issues, and media literacy so that they can take part in a meaningful way.
Annie, 42, government employee. If civics isn't taught properly in schools, young voters may not truly understand the political system or the implications of their choices.
All right, we are back with our last two opinions on this issue of whether the voting age should be lowered in Taiwan from the age of 20 to the age of 18. We've heard some very different points of view from different people. Now we have two more. Leo, he is 28. He is an event planner, so he sort of works in maybe planning weddings or planning corporate events or something like that. He says lowering the voting age could be effective as long as there's more focus on civic education in high school. Okay, I see his point of view there. So he's not against the idea, but young people need to be more prepared to do this properly and responsibly and intelligently, so they need to be more educated about voting, about the policies, about the parties, about what's at stake, about the responsibilities that come with voting. So he thinks they can handle it, but they need to be trained, they need to be educated. They need to be prepared a little bit. So civic education, teaching kids about what it is to be a citizen in the country, what your rights, responsibilities are, how the law works, how government works, how new laws are passed, all that kind of stuff. They need to basically understand government and what they're voting for more clearly. He says, for example, teenagers should learn more about the election process, how elections are run, what it all means, why we do this, major political issues, what are the important questions that are facing the country at that time, the questions and challenges. Why are we voting and why does it matter? And also media literacy, that's a very good point, so that they can take part in a meaningful way. Media literacy, understanding the media, understanding that certain people in the media, both traditional media like newspapers, television news, and also more modern media, online, internet, social influencers, people like that, understanding that sometimes people are telling you things just to get you to behave or act in a certain way. They may have a hidden agenda. They may have ulterior motives. So, understanding that sometimes you can't always trust and believe what you see and hear, and people can be trying to, use you or manipulate you or to get you to act in a way that may not be the best for you. So understanding more about that, getting some of that wisdom that comes with being an older person, try to get that into the young people, get them to understand it so that they can take part in a meaningful way. They won't just go and vote for their favorite TikTok celebrity, or I'm voting for that guy. Why? He's handsome, or something like that. Going a little bit beyond sort of just the superficial, simple reasons to vote for someone to the real bones of it, the real nuts and bolts of it, the really important stuff. Get them to understand that, and they'll probably vote in a more responsible way, is his idea.
So let's move on now to Annie. She's a government employee, and she's 42 years old. Let's find out what she has to say. She says, if civics isn't taught properly in schools, young voters may not truly understand the political system or the implications of their choices. So sometimes in school we have civics class, which basically tells us how government works, how we elect our leaders, how things and services work in a society. So yes, if civics, this particular subject, isn't taught properly in schools, then the voters probably don't know what the political process is all about. So I guess she's saying that it kind of depends. If the civics classes are taught, then the voting age can be lowered to 18. But if they're not learning enough about civics in school, then they probably shouldn't be voting, and they'll probably need to wait until they're 20 because after the age of 18 and before the age of 20, they might learn some more things about how the government works, so they'll be more qualified to vote in a democratic system. They will understand the implications of their choices. Implication just means the consequences of their actions, the conclusion that can be drawn from something. So yes, indeed, they will basically understand how they can influence society by voting. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. It's time now to listen to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。在课文第3部分， Leo 提到青少年应该学习更多选举过程、主要的政治议题和媒体素养的知识，这样他们才能有意义的参与。好，文中用到 so that they can 来表达这样他们才能怎么样怎么样。好，那么 so that 是用来引导表示目的的副词子句，表达说如此一来，这样一来，以便好让的语义。那在口语中 so that 这个 that 是可以省略的。例如 John made sure to lock his bicycle so it wouldn't be stolen. John 确认自己有把脚踏车上锁，这样车子才不会被偷走。好，那补充一下，我们用 so that 引导子句时，当它的主词跟主要子句的主词相同，我们也可以改用 so as to 加原形动词。例如 We got there early so that we could get good seats. 也可以说 We got there early so as to get good seats. 为了站到好位置，我们提早到那里。好，同样在课文第3部分 Annie 提到，如果学校没有教好公民学，年轻选民可能无法真正理解政治体制或他们选择的影响。文中用到名词 implication 是指可能的后果或影响，当这个意思解释时，常常用复数形。那这个名词它还有含义或暗示的意思。我们来介绍一下它的字首字根。好，看到 plex 或者是拼作 ple， 看到 plic 或者是 pli， 还有看到 ploy 或者是 ply， 这一类的字根表示折叠、对折或交错等等。好，在 implication 这个字当中，它的字首 im 是来自 in， 表示进入或在之中。字根 plic 表示折叠， ation 是名词字尾。那同学们可以利用折进去，要打开来才能知道其中内容，才能解读，去联想到 implication 它有含义、暗示的意思。我们也顺便补充2个有这一类字根的单字。第一个是 deploy， 字首 de 它表示否定、相反，那么字根 ploy 表示折叠。那其实 deploy 它的字源意思就是 unfold， 展开、展示，所以 deploy 它具有展开、部署的意思。我们可以用它来表达像是降落伞的展开啊，或者是人力物资的调派啊，或者是军队的部署等等。好，第2个补充的是 perplex， 它的字首 per 有完全的意思，字根 plex 表示交叠。那同学们可以试着联想，当你的所有思绪完全交叠在一起、缠绕在一起的话，那就会感到很困惑。所以 perplex 这个动词就表示使困惑、使费解。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们来回顾今天单词吧。
Journalist. Ruby wants to become a journalist to help people know the truth. Compromise. Sometimes it's better to make a compromise than to have a big argument. Grant. Lonnie will be granted extra time by the professor to finish the writing assignment. Phase. Sarah thinks every phase in life teaches something important to people. Peer. A lot of students face difficulties in handling peer pressure at school. Foster. The organization aims to foster creativity through art programs for kids. Implication. If we cut the budget, there will be serious implications for future projects.
Discussion Starter starts now!
Okay, it's time now for our discussion starter. The question is, do you agree with the idea of lowering the voting age to 18 years old? Why or why not?
I would say yes. I think lowering the voting age is a good idea, considering that, well, this kind of goes back to what Ivy said there in day one. I kind of think if you're going to ask kids to join the army, and in Taiwan, they can kind of force you to join the army, right? We have conscription here. If they're going to ask young people to go off and fight a war, I think the young people should be allowed to vote for the leader who is going to send them off to that war. It's a pretty simple point of view. And I also just think kind of young people are smarter than you give them credit for if they're properly educated. This also goes to some of the opinions we heard at the end of today's article. Give good civics classes, help them understand the big questions, the big policies and challenges the country's facing. I think we should. I think young people are doing it quite well in other countries, right? In many Western democracies, 18 years old is the age, and it's been that age for a long time. And I think it's just the right thing to do, especially because young people are treated as adults at the age of 18 in most other ways.
Okay, well, that's an interesting opinion, but no, I don't agree with the position of lowering the voting age to 18 because I just simply think that the number 20 sounds more round, okay? It's more of a round number.
It's true.
18 is kind of complicated, a 1 and an 8 together. But 20, that's like a milestone number, 20. You can't beat that for precision. Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of our program, and please make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here, I am Roger.
I am Mike.
See you next time.